G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. Now as always, we do have a lot to go over. Of course, we're going to look at the maps in the north, in Kursk, where Ukraine has launched its offensive. And today what we need to speak about there is, will Russia launch a counter-offensive against that? It's being rumoured by a lot of pages, but what we're going to look is, does this make doctrinal or strategic sense for Russia to pull in the reserves, pull in the redeployment of forces to actually push Ukraine out of that area? We'll look over that. Of course, then we're going to look in the east and the south. We're going to look at where the map is changing and what specific elements of ground are shifting and maybe what weapon systems will come into play. And of course, where the train lines are, where the train stations are for key logistical areas, and we'll look at some topographical maps there and how people are seeing overall operations by some polls and some graphs we've got also. All of this will be tied together too by one of the guys who works behind the scenes for me for some analysis, intelligence, and a much higher qualification in anything electronic than I. He sent me across some fantastic information that we're going to talk about for drones, areas of the front line, and bots as well. Now, you've probably seen or seeing at the moment, whenever this video comes out, that Ukraine has launched what is said to be a, quote, massive drone attack across multiple regions in Russia. Now, at time of filming, that is basically all the information that I have available, being reported from both Russian and Ukrainian accounts. So tomorrow's update, I'll get you more information on exactly what has occurred there. So where I want to start is with some analysis from one of my guys who is incredibly intelligent and does a great job on this before we jump into the maps and have more of a look. Now, something you know that I've been talking about for a few months now, but particularly the last few weeks, was a few months ago we saw that it was rumoured that Russian forces were using a fibre optic, basically umbilical cord connected drone. Of course, that can defeat any sort of electronic warfare systems. And we know these EW systems is what is one of the main counters for drones and is what is being developed even back end to deter drones in the future. But this gets around all of that. But of course, there's a lot of cons to this. So this bloke is a PhD in electrical engineering, and he has spoken to me specifically about this. So let's then go over it. And I should say, sorry, in the last 2 weeks, what I've been speaking about is we have seen these drones being used, but only in Kursk, being only in Russian territory, which we found interesting too. But fiber optic drone. There is one thing that people usually miss with this discussion. Fiber optic cable is expensive. Not prohibitively expensive, but still. Before wireless modems, we had Ethernet cables. They have copper cores and their range was 30 to 50 meters. If you get a good one, the thicker cores, you can make them work at 100 meters. Coaxial cable can work at 500 meters, maybe more. But anything over 1 kilometer, you have to use fiber optic cable. So the drone operators are at least 1 kilometer away, otherwise they would use coaxial cables, which should cost a third or a quarter of then the fiber optics. So from this, we get that it's probably at least 1 kilometer away that these are being used. Otherwise, you'd use the cheaper item. But you also said that Russia uses these drones only in Kursk. That is my observation of where we've seen this footage come out of. This made me think that Russians might have electronically fortified some parts of the Kursk sector. They might have laid a fibre optic backbone underground with some small wireless transceivers here and there. It is like a garden irrigation system. You have buried pipes and some small sprinklers around. As long as the sprinkler wireless transceivers are very low power and short range, they will escape detection. A drone can fly to one of those sprinklers using GLONASS inertial navigation systems and other guidance systems that do not require communication. Then it can attach itself to the sprinkler like a Roomba finding its plug when it is on low battery. If it is like that, the operators can be kilometers away. Now, I'm not saying that it is anything like this, but it is an interesting idea to look at and see if something like this will be used down the line in future of warfare. People compare these drones with tows, but it is not correct. A tow umbilical cord does not transmit video. It only transmits some control signals, so you don't need a high capacity connection. You can do what Russians do with only fiber optics. So it's not transmitting everything, video feeds everything back. With what we're seeing here, it has to be done by fiber optic cable at any sort of distance. Overall, this is quite a creative use of electronics. I don't know whether Russia has this irrigation system, but it can work as a huge force multiplier against invaders from afar. If Iran sets something like this, they will be impervious to land invasions, unless the attacker accepts high losses, much, much higher than the coalition losses in Afghanistan or Iraq. Now, I don't think anything like this has been laid, but it is very interesting to see how in a future electronic warfare and a denial of electronic items environment, how something like this may work. Because again, if you have an inertial guidance system or an optical guidance system, that too can be protected. It can't be jammed. To connect directly to something like this, to then be used by an actual physical controller that is connected by an umbilical, and then you've got a range of many, many kilometers, and it is impervious to being jammed. So I thought that was very interesting to look at and see if countries will set something like that up in areas of which there could be an invasion through. So I thought that was a very interesting look at this. Now, speaking of bots, this is his take. I think you are a very juicy target for bots. You managed to stay impartial into almost the third year of the war, so all the way through. So you attract an audience from both camps. You probably attract people who are less invested in this war as well. Maybe people like unnamed YouTuber have a lot more subscribers and interactions than you, but those people are already hardline supporters of one camp. Bots cannot do much in these environments. So I disagree slightly here. They can't do much maybe in swinging opinions, but like in an election, you're not trying to swing the hardcore people of the right or the left. You're trying to swing people on the fence and to reaffirm how people are feeling. Now, what I think bots are doing across social media is, say, liking comments, promoting videos, because it gives an idea of confirmation bias. So, well, this has X amount of comments on this, likes on this comment, or this has X amount of views, that psychologically it makes us think, oh, that must be more correct. More people feel this way, and also pushing things up then the algorithm too. More people see it, the reaffirming that confirmation. I think a lot of bots not only are trying to swing, it's trying to make that confirmation bias even further on people in even the hardcore camps on both sides. So that is very interesting too. But I could see that I could be a target for this because I probably have a lot of people on the fence. I attract people from both sides of the camp, and potentially even some who aren't super invested in this, to try and swing. So again, with any comment sections, anything, always be very, very careful then online. So I want to talk about Pokrovsk. So let's jump onto then the deep state map here. And of course, here in the center, we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22, the purple since 2014, the green and blue within Ukraine's borders is where Ukraine has pushed back the Russians. All the Russians have then withdrawn in some cases, the blue being that just under 2 weeks in. When we look at Russian territory, that is Ukraine's offensive action over now a month seen in the blue. But where we're going to come down to is the most important area, I believe, on the front line right now, which is Pokrovsk. Now, straight off the bat, you will see 2 changes on this map in this area. So, of course, this is Pokrovsk here. We have Novohorovka, which has come under control of the Russian forces. Now, there are some saying that this hasn't come under control by this map, by a lot of other maps. All the maps we see, this has come under control. There is still some speculation about this, but I would say it has come under control. As well, we see just to the west of Krasnohorivka, further westwards controlled by the Russian forces in now the Nevelsky gap that is being produced in here. And will we see a withdrawal by the Ukrainian forces back out of here? But I want to talk about a few interesting things in here. Of course, what we spoke about the other day was how strategically important Seledove is in here to try and maybe delay the Russian force. And will Russia actually be able to push through here, or will they go on the flanks to try and outflank this area? We have seen the Russians push in. We have seen a counterattack to push them back out. And that tells us how important this area was. Now, this is what I have been sent across here too. So the 2 areas you need to be aware of is Novohorovka and Seladove to make sense of this. The Ukrainian counterattack, or the Ukrainian resistance, depending on whether Russia ever captured large parts of Seladove, is quite futile. Again, some maps showed they had captured and got pushed out, others showed the Russians never came in. Checking from the elevation map, it is 50 metres at lower altitude than Novhorivka, and it is only 6 kilometres from Novhorivka. 6 kilometres is TOS-1 Alpha range. Of course, the heavy flamethrower, a completely devastating weapon. That said, with such a short range, Russia really struggled to actually get that weapon into the fight. But the reason I think the micro-district of Chasiv Yar fell fairly quickly was Russia's use, because they could get that system into the fold. So when we bring up then the topo map, this is what we're looking at. Seladove does sit lower than Novhorivka, and of course, to give you an idea, here is Pokrovsk in here. So the range for that system, but there's even more in this. Elevation is important not only for troop movements, but also for electronic warfare. There is a reason the old TV and radio towers were built on hills. A lot of transmission power is lost to reflection from the ground. The reflected waves interfere with the waves reaching the receiver directly. This is called multipath fading. It is predictable and can be accounted for if the ground is sand or water, but it is unpredictable if the ground shows a lot of variations, rocky terrain, or is it covered with foliage or shrubbery. If your transmitter is at an elevated location, the reflective waves will have a lot of power and the effect of the interference will be lower. So the extra 50 meters gives your signal a head start. It means longer range or harder to jam FPV drones for the enemy, and shorter range and easier to jam FPV drones for yourself. So when we talk about terrain, you and I really speak about lethal systems. We talk about artillery, we talk about guns, we talk about defilade fire. We don't take into account, which we should, the effect on radio signals from radios to control, well, just speaking to each other, but then to control your drone, and also then to jam drones as well. Ukraine can try to make up the elevation difference by increasing the transmission power, but so can Russia. Also, increased power makes your electronic warfare equipment easier to detect. So I'm not sure if other countries use this, but to do with radios in the Australian Army, we have this idea of higher, higher, higher. So higher antenna, higher power. But the last in that, what you want to do, the last thing if you're trying to get communications, the last one is higher power, because it makes it then easier to detect for your enemy. I believe the main reason Seladove is impossible to defend, it is being within the TOS-1 Alpha range. Novhorivka is relatively intact, so Russia can hide these weapons in various buildings before Ukraine can detect these weapons and attack them. But the electronic warfare advantages are nothing to shrug off as well. So some fantastic observations of this too. And that TOS-1 is not something that I'd really considered, being such a short range, because the 6Ks between major areas, we don't actually see this that much. And that TOS-1, although devastating to actually be able to bring into the fight, we don't see that much. But we did see it in the micro district around here from Bakhmut, of an area where they can hide these from attacks and then make them and bring them into the fight. Will we see that? Well, again, we're not sure. We haven't yet seen this, but some great observations there as well, especially about the radio signals and jamming too. So let's just have a look at where some of these maps maybe line up. Now, we don't have this movement here shown on the Syriac map today, but being shown by the Ukrainian map of a Russian movement, I'm more inclined to then believe it. But what we do see on the Syriac is this movement out to the west of Krasnodarivka. Now, Syriac shows slightly more, but again, same direction. We know there was some movement here. One thing Syriac does show is a further northern push out of here across the Lozova River too. So again, we'll get a better idea as this continues going forward. And then this Novelsky pocket in here continues to sort of get squeezed down, and we'll see if there will be a withdrawal out of here. Now, something that is not spoken about enough in here, and should be, is the train lines. And I found a really, really interesting article that I will share for you here about the train lines and in Pokrovsk. So this is Major Serhiy, and I won't try and pronounce your last name. I'm very sorry here, but he's the press officer for the 59th Motorised Brigade, which defends part of the front line near Pokrovsk. During the war, Pokrovsk has become the administrative, political, and logistical center of the Donetsk region. Whoever controls Pokrovsk also controls the roads to the north and the south. He said that the Ukrainian defenders will do everything possible to prevent the Russians from getting closer to Pokrovsk, but they are outnumbered 4 or 5 to 1 along much of the front. Russia claimed Sunday to have captured the village of Novorovka, just north of Seladove. Of course, there's a lot of pushback on if Russia did this or not. Again, the maps are showing it, as well as all the geolocations too. Until now, Pokrovsk's position on the rail network meant the city was a place to which the Ukrainians fleeing other parts of Donbass were evacuated. Now it's Pokrovsk residents' turn to flee. The commander here said that 20,000 people remain in the city, about a third of its pre-war population. So 60,000 people, this is a major city. Now, we're speaking about the train lines here on a pure humanitarian mission as far as getting people out, but we can't ever downplay the logistics that trains take part in war. Trains are far, far more efficient than moving things by truck. So this lady here, Valentia Teshnina, was in a near panic Monday afternoon after being told there were no more trains departing the city. The station was being closed down. Luckily, she got a replacement bus to take evacuees to the nearest functioning train station, 113 kilometres to the west of the city at Pavlograd. Now, I'm very glad that Valentia got out of here, but what this tells us is, well, the nearest functioning train station is 113 kilometres west. So let's have a look here at the train line map in Ukraine. Now, I've drawn in these borders here of occupied territory, and I know it is rough as guts, but we're just going to have to deal with it. Now, this is Pokrovsk in here. And you can see where these trains don't go then into occupied areas, and this is Pavlograd in here. Now, what this gives us a good idea on is the amount of supply that actually comes into here to then be dissipated into areas of the front line, not only down somewhere like Ugledars down in here, then of course we have the other areas of the front from Avdiivka through to Chasiv Yar and all of this. This is, of course, is Kramatorsk, but you can see how important the train lines are into here. Of course, you can see for the civilian use of bringing people back out, but the military use of getting soldiers to the front, getting, and then massive logistical elements to the front here, that it's over 100 kilometres back to the next station. Now, of course, trains can go one way and reverse up. So again, it's going to be difficult to get an idea exactly what is occurring in here, but this is a major element that if Russia is able to then get Pokrovsk, the train line there, but just being this close to Pokrovsk and now the train's not running can have a huge effect on the logistics through this whole eastern sector of the front line as well, and something not to be then played down. Before we have a look at Kursk, let's have a look at the maps and have a look in other areas that then are changing. So where we need to move just south of here, we'll come down into Ugledar, and we can see a further Russian push here. Now, there is a lot of speculation that Vodiany was not occupied by the Russians yesterday. This map is showing it, and I've even seen Deep State pushing back, showing geolocated footage, saying whoever's calling us out saying this wasn't, well, have a look at this footage here. So we can say likely that all of this was occupied. Now we can see a further push just to the west of here too. We presume Russia, with how costly it's been trying to get Ugledar front on, is trying to have a envelopment around this or try from another axis here. And the way we know that this has moved is we do have a geolocation here. So this is a Russian flag being raised right here. And then this footage, this has been geolocated to just on this quarry element right here. Now, let's have a zoom in on this map right here. So we're talking right about where my cursor is where then that was geolocated to. So there is movement in here. Now, let's just have a quick look on a couple of these maps. Now, Noel reports he has his Ugledar map update as well. So he doesn't show the amount up into Vodiany that Deep State show, but does show the same amount of filling in just to the east of Ugledar here itself. So we 100% can confirm there was definite movement in here. Now, Suryak, this is weird because it shows different again. Suryak shows that the Russian forces are bordered up this road where both sides, maps, Noel and Deep State are showing there is a northern push across here, but he's also showing that Vodiany has come under Russian control as well, but also where this geolocated footage is. So again, what I'm trying to get across is, to my eye, these are close enough to say, look, we know there was movement here, we know areas have come under control. it may be some slight lift differences, but we know there was definitely an advancement there. Now we have Konstantinivka here. No change shown on this map, but Syriac does show that there was an easterly push here by the Russian forces just on the outskirts of Konstantinivka up to where this reservoir is here. No change shown on this map today. Now, those are the changes shown on the deep state, but we do have a couple more from Noel reports. Now, this map here does show this movement across west into Chasiv Yar. Of course, we've seen the canal runs through here. Very difficult to cross across here. This is one of the areas we saw those TOS-1s working a lot. Devastating thermobaric weapon system, but very, very short range to try and bring into the fight. Of course, such short range, they're highly susceptible to things like drones. Now, Noel reports he is now showing this as well. So he's confirming this crossing at Kalinivkia too. This showed a few days ago. Now it's showing on his. We can confirm the Russian forces have crossed this canal in an area now for an amount of time, and we'll see if they can continue developing this across in Chasiv Yar. Now we need to push up into Pashani. This is this front here. Now what we say this every time, but we believe Russia's trying to push into here to create a north and south element to try and cut the logistical supply that'll come through here, making it a little bit easier for what they eventually want, I'm guessing, is Kupiansk in here, of course, another hub. Now, let's have a look at then what Noel reports is showing in here. Now, this is not easy to line up ever, but is showing out from Pashani a further westwards push. Now, it doesn't show the south push that both Syriac and Deep State show in here, but again, just another source showing that there is some push and movement out of Pashani. So let's talk about a Russian counterattack and an attack, maybe a counterattack, against where Ukraine had their offensive into then the Kursk Oblast. So this is it here. No change shown on this map. No change shown on Noel Reports' map now for a couple of days. So this area in here has really stabilized. Yes, there are local fighting. Yes, some little bits and pieces change, but considering that 130 square kilometers we saw fall in a day, then the next day, it's none of that anymore. And that said, like we said at the time, that we do know these things will slow down as logistics get more difficult to supply and as things get larger and larger. That is how large-scale maneuver warfare goes, especially if then the supply can't keep up, and the demand on logistics in war is absolutely massive. So I just want to show you, if you're part of the Telegram, you'll know I've spoken about this. I've done a number of polls over a number of days as the situation becomes more clear and taking the entire front line into account. Will the Ukrainian Kursk offensive be either a net positive, a net negative, or is it too early so far to tell? Now, for the first, say, 3 weeks, I was thinking it was too early to tell. Now I've sort of swung and I believe it may be a net negative if Russia, because Russia has not yet taken the bait here. If Russia don't take that bait, I believe it will be an overall net negative. And the majority of people, I think, there agree or would buy the poll. Now, a follower of mine, I don't know if I can say his name, but I'll just say K-Man, has actually put these in Excel and then has done a graph for me. Now, this shows what I have posted through just screenshots on the Telegram of the previous polls. We've done a number of these polls, but will the Ukrainian gamble into Kursk pay off? Worded slightly different, same then meaning. So as you can see, there has been a slip down in the net positive for Ukraine. Now you can see a large slip down in the too early to tell and a large increase in the net negative, except for the very last vote. Here it has flattened out, but what you can see is that there are a lot of people saying it was too early, and then more people have been moving across into that net negative and some changing from the net positive. This is one thing I really like about having an audience that is very critical thinking and open. Yes, it may be open to bots. Yes, it may be open to people trying to push, but again, we can see how people may be shifting their minds here, and we have actually seen a larger increase in the net positive on the past week as well. So we will see how this thing goes, and I'll continue those polls and people being able to have their say about this. But I think as far as just pure strategic overall attritional warfare, I think if Russia do a counteroffensive in here, like a lot of Ukrainian pages are speculating today, I think it would actually be a strategically poor move for Russia. Now, nothing that Ukraine has actually captured here in Kursk is considered a vital industrial capacity element for Russia. It's not a massive industrial building, workshop, station that has been captured in here, or is anything in here overwhelmingly high in strategic value. Are areas in here important? Yes, I'll not take that away. Overwhelming strategic important value is somewhere like Sevastopol, massive naval base, area where things can be cached and stored. It does not have that huge industrial capacity or an overwhelmingly strategic importance in here too, at least compared to other areas. And what we need to do is then, I'll back that up by talking about in attritional warfare. In attritional war, terrain that does not have a vital industrial centre is irrelevant. It is always better to retreat and preserve forces regardless of the political consequences. So regardless of how this is seen, you're better off to preserve forces. Fighting on disadvantageous terrain burns up units, losing experienced soldiers who are key to victory. Remember, the key to victory in protracted attritional war is the best low-end formation possible in large numbers. The German obsession with Stalingrad in 1942 is a prime example of fighting on unfavourable terrain for a political reasons, purely to capture a city bearing Stalin's name. The goal is to force the enemy to expand vital materials and strategic reserves on strategically meaningless operations. This is what we hear Ukraine say that they're doing to Russia down in the east, from Bakhmut to Avdiivka to Osharetny to Ugledar, is we are making Russia expend their vital resources on areas that are meaningless. Although I do question the strategic importance of areas like Bakhmut and especially Avdiivka, as now we have seen that cascade behind Avdiivka. But a key pitfall to avoid is being dragged into the very same trap that has been set for the enemy. So this very same trap is you push into Kursk, you're trying to get Russia to expend vital resources on then strategically meaningless areas, but you could fall into the same trap on the other side of this. This is this balance of strategic warfare. Now, the military conduct of war is driven by overall political strategic objectives, military realities, and economic limitations. Combat operations are shallow and focus on destroying enemy resources, not on gaining terrain. So inflicting those losses to make them expend their forces. Now, this is an important bit to know. Propaganda is used to support military operations, not the other way around. So you have a military operation and propaganda to support that. You should not launch a military operation that is the propaganda within itself, according to the attritional warfare of the doctrine of attritional warfare. And this, in my opinion, is why the Kursk offensive was always a gamble for Ukraine, with high reward but very high risk. If Russia did counterattack, it would potentially have given Ukraine some relief in the Donbass. But if Russia didn't take the bait, and so far it hasn't seemed that it has taken the bait, Ukraine would be left holding the bag and around another 110 kilometres of front line, as I've mapped out on here just to show. I know it would be much longer than this. And this is the problem. If you are not the numerical advantage, like Ukraine does not have the manpower numbers that Russia does have at the front line, having that lengthening of front line, therefore you're left with having to have a lot more soldiers in this area, and other areas, if they haven't taken the bait, therefore could be jeopardized, like we're seeing in Pokrovsk. And there is no clear evidence yet, by the CNN article we went over yesterday, that Ukraine has been building vast fortifications in these occupied areas in Kursk. And I think that it is likely that once winter sets in and the east may continue deteriorating, logistics are going to get far more difficult into here in Kursk. We may see then a Ukrainian withdrawal back out of Kursk. So strategically, I think in here, the best move for Russia may just be build the defensive works, the people that have been pushed out of here into hotels, or however that looks for the refugees out of this area. Hold this, because you are creating an issue that Ukraine needs to hold an amount of forces in here that can't be deployed down to the east, or else it will fall back once winter sets in, which is not very far away. These forces, if they haven't dug in and fortified positions, may have to withdraw anyway, or you're going to have an easier time pushing through. Strategically, pure strategic, if you leave out emotions and optics in this, purely strategically, I could see Russia using this actually to their advantage. Now, one thing we do know from the Soviet Union through the Russian Federation is command decisions often jeopardized by an obsession with optics and the political consequences. And like we say just in here, that regardless of the political consequences, but how this is seen to the Kremlin can affect decisions. So no, we don't want our adversary occupying it of our land and then forcing tens of thousands to push this back out. But if you were to take any emotion out, I actually think the best decision would be to fortify, don't let it expand vital resources into here and push in another area. And we've said that from the beginning, but what will happen? Well, we don't know. But it has been a common theme, I believe, with command decisions through this war from both the Russian armed forces and the Ukrainian armed forces of letting political consequences and optics affect the best command strategic decision on the ground, purely for how things are seen politically and in the media. Legends, have a fantastic day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. If you want to support me, there's links down below, but never feel obliged, and I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you very much. Again, bye-bye.